Good afternoon. Welcome to the City Club of Cleveland. My name is Robin Minter-Smyers. I'm a member of the Board of Directors of the City Club, and it is truly my pleasure to introduce today's speaker, Cuyahoga County Executive Ed Fitzgerald. Most of you are already familiar with the basics of the biography of County Executive Fitzgerald. He's a graduate of The Ohio State University and then attended Cleveland Marshall College of Law. After earning his law degree, County Executive Fitzgerald was commissioned as a special agent with the FBI and worked as a member of the Organized Crime Task Force in Chicago, where he headed an investigation into political corruption. He then returned to the Cleveland area, serving as a county prosecutor, a lawyer in private practice, and finally mayor of the city of Lakewood. In 2009, a public worn weary by the corruption scandal embraced the reform of county government, and in 2010, he was elected to serve as Cuyahoga County's first executive. You may be less familiar with some other parts of the biography of County Executive Fitzgerald. He's the son of two parents in the public health field. He's the seventh of 8 children, and he's older than he looks. He's the father of 4 children, including one in college, so he knows the importance personally of college savings accounts. A year ago, we were honored to welcome County Executive Fitzgerald to the City Club podium to give his second State of the County address. In his address, he vowed to lead the county into a period of unprecedented openness, transparency, and integrity. His efforts have earned praise from Cleveland Magazine for getting Cuyahoga County on the right track for the first time in at least a century. Inside Business has said he's expanding our sense of how a political leader can lead by stepping into some of our biggest civic conversations, from regionalism to downtown Cleveland's future. It seems clear that County Executive Fitzgerald is a politician of some talent, and many believe his future holds great promise, perhaps one day at the state level, perhaps even someday soon. Today we'll get to hear more about the future and promise of Cuyahoga County. Please welcome to the City Club of Cleveland for the 3rd annual State of the County address, Cuyahoga County Executive Ed Fitzgerald.
I could tell you wanted to make sure you got the syllables right. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm getting my materials ready. I have my Marco Rubio bottle of water here. Good afternoon. It's always an honor to speak at the City Club of Cleveland, which for a century has provided a forum for public discourse, both in Cleveland and for the rest of the country. I want to thank you all for being here. I especially want to recognize Jim Foster, who recently announced his retirement, and he has served both this organization and this community with great dedication. I didn't know people would applaud. You have cut into my time now, Jim. I also want to recognize all the public officials in attendance here today, particularly Council President Connolly and my colleagues on County Council, Mayor Jackson, and the numerous suburban mayors, state legislators, and other officials here today. And I'm gratified to see the turnout that we have here today, which I think is record-setting, and it is a compliment not to me, but for the new form of government that we have in this county. This is my 3rd State of the County address, as Robin mentioned. In 2011, you and I met here and talked about our aspirations for our new form of government and for the greater Cleveland area as a whole. In 2012, we discussed the Western Reserve Plan, a 12-point long-term plan for our future. In 2013, I want to review with you our progress to date, the challenges that remain, and my optimism for what is to come. In its more than 200-year history, this county has faced a host of challenges. Our early citizens built a center of commerce which helped win the Civil War. They helped drive an industrial revolution that transformed the entire world. And we weathered those growing pains to emerge in the early 20th century as one of the premier metropolitan areas in the United States. 100 years ago, an essayist described this county as a place which embodied boundless optimism. A few years later, the effects of the Great Depression had taken a toll on that optimism. And I know that not just from the history books, but from the stories that my dad told me about growing up here in the 1920s and 1930s. And in some ways, our community may have never fully recovered from that economic dislocation. But I believe that times and our fortunes are changing for the better. We've certainly seen moments of improvement in recent decades, but consistent growth has been a challenge. But just as periods of decline were apparent, now our resurgence is undeniable. We're catching our breath, and the ingredients are finally here to build a new and stronger foundation for progress. Because while in the past we were frozen by our fragmentation, we have never been as united as a county as we are at this very moment. Earlier this year, for instance, all 59 communities in Cuyahoga County signed on to a business attraction and no poaching agreement. Now just think about that for a moment. When we set out to bring every single community in this county to the table, there were plenty of skeptics. But all 59 communities sat down with us, and all 59 communities signed on to affirm not just our mutual goals, but our unrelenting belief in this county's future. And now there are daily examples of communities working together to explore shared services, as detailed by the slide behind me, and better ways of cooperating with each other, everything from IT services to health insurance benefits. And it's worth noting, by the way, that our route to greater unity has been difficult, and it faced a really major obstacle when this community was hit by the corrupt activities of some individuals who betrayed the public trust. And fortunately, federal law enforcement stepped in and righted those wrongs. Steve Dettelbach, who's the U.S. Attorney for the Northern District of Ohio, who is here with me today, I want to say that this community owes you and your colleagues in federal law enforcement a real debt of gratitude for helping to return local government to the people. And on behalf of the citizens of this county, I want to extend to you and your colleagues a long overdue thank you for your zealous pursuit of corruption and support for integrity. But the actions of federal law enforcement were really just phase one. Upon taking office, we launched phase two of this cleanup operation. We dismantled, in the last couple years, the political patronage machine which was choking county government, the who you know and not what you know system, and will never let something like that ever again grab the reins of our local democracy. But the specific methods of our management are important, and I want to speak to you today briefly, or maybe not so briefly, about the strategies we've implemented and the results we have achieved on your behalf in the last 2 years. Now, our system is reviewed and guided by a process called CountyStat, which is a data-driven system of performance measures with an emphasis on proven best practices implemented around the state and around the country. We scrutinize everything from the number of vehicles to fuel usage to utility payments to personnel costs in all its forms. A performance-based approach, exemplified by CountyStat, allows a government to make decisions based on reality, not anecdotes, and to make decisions based on long-term strategies, not short-term fiscal emergencies. So halfway through our term in office, is it working? In a word, yes. Personnel costs are our number one expenditure, and that was our number one focus for reducing costs. There's a frequently repeated myth about government that it always gets bigger. It can never become more efficient, and we have proven that wrong. In 2007, for instance, there were 6,374 county employees. And at the end of 2012, we were down to 4,507, a reduction of over 1,800 positions. And we did not obtain these efficiencies by taking the easy route. There were no across-the-board layoffs. Our data-driven process led us to increase staffing in a few areas, while other departments, like the former auditor's office, where inefficiency had been brought to an art form, saw significant reductions. Now, we have 31 separate bargaining units that we negotiate with, and we have asked all of them to work with us to contain costs, and they have responded. Now, I know that there are some people who believe that the road to good government runs right over the government worker, but I don't believe that you can serve the people by attacking the people's employees. And in this whole process, our unions agreed to unprecedented concessions. County employees were part of the solution. They made suggestions for efficiencies, and they saw the challenges we faced, and they helped us tackle them head on. But saving money is really just one part of the story. We hunted saving money on personnel is just one part of the story, because we hunted loose pennies down every corner of county government. Working with our partners in the private sector through our loaned executive plan, we reduced everything from printers to vehicles, office supplies, redundant hardware and software programs, and now entire buildings, savings additional millions of dollars. And this is what's also important. Services were not cut because we had a parallel focus on efficient service. Our customers were served more quickly, backlogs in departments such as the Board of Revision were finally addressed, and our ongoing update of our tech system allowed us to respond more quickly to constituent concerns. Perhaps the strongest indication of our effectiveness in fiscal areas is reflected in our financial position. Now, just recently, all three major bond rating agencies reviewed our financial position and reached the same basic conclusion. We're fiscally responsible, we're fiscally strong, and our financial future is bright. And I want you to know how they described your county government. They described it as follows. Conservative budgeting and proactive management of expenses has resulted in strong financial operations. The new government has taken measures to create a merit-based culture, emphasizes data-driven results. Economic development has been strong with a number of large projects currently under construction, and we expect these economic development efforts to translate to a healthier economy. But if you're like me, you're thinking, well, that sounds good, but what are the actual numbers? Well, government finance experts usually recommend that at least 15% of a local government's general fund should be held in reserve for emergencies and to allow for some fiscal flexibility. Having 25% is considered excellent. At the close of 2012, the county had approximately 37% of its general fund in unencumbered reserve. We're the only county in Ohio that has passed a 2-year balanced budget. And those numbers, by the way, don't even include other sub-funds that we're holding in reserve within the general fund. And if you include those, it actually brings our total reserve in the general fund to approximately 52%, which is over $183 million in cash. But I want you to know also, our drive for innovation never ends. It's a continual process. There's a whole nother level of efficiency that we believe can be attained through the implementation of something called an Enterprise Resource Plan, or ERP. Now, this is a recognized best practice among management experts. Frequently, it's done in large corporations, rarely in the public sector. And it entails a redesign of the whole workflow process with a special emphasis on integrating technology. Now, we've been working with some of our loaned executives from the private sector on this project since last year, and I expect to begin rolling it out as this year progresses. Now, I know what you're thinking. Integrating technology while redesigning workflow processes to maximize efficiency. Please, tell us more. Well, I'm sorry, but time constraints are forcing me to move on. But I can tell you that our passion for transparency and efficiency and accountability is also spreading to other parts of local government. And I'm very pleased to report that it has been embraced by the leaders of our local justice system. Through the Justice System Reform Task Force, which I chair, for the first time in the history of this county, Common Pleas Court, the County Prosecutor's Office, the Police Chiefs Association, the City of Cleveland, Cleveland Municipal Court, the Suburban Municipal Judges, and the Public Defender's Office have all agreed on a set of performance measures and goals to bring greater efficiency, transparency, and effectiveness to our administration of justice in this county. Now, this was a debate and a discussion that had been going on for many, many years. And it was just settled, actually, just last Thursday, thanks in a very long but productive meeting, and in due in large part, actually, to the leadership of Administrative Judge Nancy First and Prosecutor Tim McGinney. And this is a very important step forward for this county, and I'd like them to stand and be recognized. Where are you? There she is. Becoming more efficient, by the way, it just doesn't benefit county operations, because we've also saved over $5 million just in property appraisal costs. And we're now able to return that money under state law to local communities, both their school districts and their cities. So in the next few weeks, they will hopefully be receiving some much-needed help from the county. And sometimes it's a significant amount of money. So for instance, the Cleveland Metropolitan School District will get over $700,000 because we were more efficient in the way that we have appraised our properties. And I've always believed that local government is the branch of government that is closest to the people. And in these difficult times, we have a responsibility to stand side by side as a partner with our local governments in serving our people. But reform isn't just about saving money. It's also about employees and vendors living up to the highest standards. We've instituted mandatory performance reviews and standards for every employee. Our Inspector General's office conducts swift and effective internal investigations of any alleged misconduct. Our internal auditor monitors fiscal compliance. Our vendors are required to go through mandatory ethics training, and our recently passed legislation debars corrupt contractors from doing business with the county. And this year, for the first time, we're implementing a merit raise system for our civil service employees. In other words, it's not enough to just not do wrong. It's essential to create a culture within county government that demands integrity and rewards merit and excellence. And that's why I'm taking steps to incorporate these principles into our form of government. Our Charter Review Commission, which is studying possible improvements to the charter, will be reviewing proposals, and I'm urging them to include things such as the position of Inspector General in the charter itself, so that we can continue unabated our progress in this area. That must be the Inspector General clapping. It's also important to have outside involvement in the operation of county government to ensure that it always strives to embody national best practices. Last year, I recommended the formation of a Center for Excellence in Local Government, which is a consortium of academia, the private sector, and local foundations which can be embedded in our operations and provide both guidance and even more transparency. And I can tell you that after having met with those stakeholders, I'm confident that that entity will be formalized this year. But it's important to note that no matter what safeguards are built into our system, the spirit of reform cannot be dependent upon one set of elected officials or outside institutions or this or that ordinance. There's no substitute for an informed and engaged citizenry. And your support and involvement over the last 2 years, as evidenced by your attendance here today, gives me confidence that you will do just that. Now, the county government that we have reformed over the last 2 years is now better positioned to deliver on the strategies that we laid out in the 12 goals of the Western Reserve Plan last year, as well as various special projects which are just as crucial to our success. The Western Reserve Plan is a long-term policy vision for county government, and it includes objectives ranging from economic development and economic inclusion to human services delivery and to public safety and regionalism. And 1 year later, I can report to you that progress has been made in each and every category. Now, we are mandated by our charter to place economic development and job creation at the forefront of our activities. Our $100 million Economic Development Fund is the only county-based fund of its scale or anywhere close to that scale in this state. And it's predicated specifically on job creation, and it is working. The number of loans to local businesses has increased dramatically, and the amount of private capital has also increased dramatically. And the number of jobs created by direct involvement of the county has more than doubled in the last 2 years. And it's important to note, I think, that we're talking about creating real jobs that are supporting real families. We do not have a philosophy of corporate giveaways whose benefits never really trickle down to the rest of us. And we believe strongly that this economic progress which we have seen has to be felt in every part of the county. So our Economic Inclusion Task Force has continued to create a framework which will ensure economic justice along with economic progress. Our Human Services mission continues, though, to be at the heart of what we do. We cannot sit here comfortably today in this setting and pretend that we can't see and that we don't know that there's still too much poverty and too much suffering in our county. We continue to care for the most vulnerable in our community. We help feed the hungry. We care for abused children. We stand up for neglected seniors. We advocate for the mentally ill. Our Metro Hospital cares for the sick and never turns anyone away. And I'm proud that I live in a county that accepts those responsibilities, as was demonstrated when the voters of this county renewed our Health and Human Services levy by nearly 70% of the vote last year. So thank you for that. But we have also emerged as a nationwide leader in trying to provide those human services in an innovative way. We're one of the only counties in the United States which has embraced the pay-for-success strategy, a concept where we make an early investment in a particularly impactful social service and thereby save money in the long run. In October of last year, we received a Second Chance Act grant for Cuyahoga County to implement a pay-for-success project for a prisoner reentry program. And we're now working with the Gun Foundation and others to put that program into action. And we're the first county in the United States to have gone this far in that innovative approach. And we believe in a pay-for-success approach because it's consistent with what both national research has demonstrated and what our own experience has taught us. We know, for instance, that when it comes to education, the earlier you can intervene in a child's life, the more effective your strategy will be. We never give up on any child, but we also know that our dollars will be more effective if invested in the early stages of a child's development. And that's why we increase the number of children we serve in our universal pre-kindergarten program by investing an additional $1 million into it. And as was noted by the President in his State of the Union address, these are proven strategies. They're not theories, and they have documented positive outcomes. It's also why I have proposed that a major component of our college scholarship strategy should focus on children as they begin their educational journey, not at the end of it. Our college savings account program will establish for each incoming kindergarten student a savings account, which can be used for either college or technical training. It's based on the premise that every child in this county has an educational future beyond high school. We know that there is a direct link between education and income level. And as this chart demonstrates, each step upward on the educational ladder brings with it economic progress. We also know that new research shows that children with savings accounts are up to 7 times more likely to attend college than those without an account, regardless of their income, race, or parents' educational attainment. Our program will be open to every child, regardless of income, public or private school. It will be a universal value in this county. And at approximately 15,000 kindergartners per year, it will be the largest program of its kind in the country. Now, it is not a guarantee of a college degree or a vocational certificate, although it can be used for both. It's just the first step on a very long path. It will require hard work, sacrifice, and savings from the student, their families, and the cooperation of colleges and technical schools. But it can be done. And many of our local school superintendents have already expressed their enthusiastic support, and we're going to be the first county in America to show how it can be done. Now, one of the most basic functions of local government is to help keep its citizens safe. Traditionally, the county has played a part in this task through our sheriff's office, but we've also embraced a wider challenge to make this a safer county in a multitude of ways. For the first time in our history, the county is proposing a public safety master plan, which I'm going to be releasing later this week. Among its elements is a new emergency operations center, the site for which has been tentatively identified in Broadview Heights. And this new facility is going to allow us to respond more quickly and effectively to all types of emergency situations, whether they be natural disasters or otherwise. And it's consistent with a new 911 strategy, which will also be released shortly, and which I also have with me here today. Now, currently in this county, if you place a 911 call, there are 48 separate locations which might answer that call. That status quo is just not acceptable in this vital area of public safety. Our plan provides for the planning and financial resources to eventually bring the total number of 911 call centers down to 4 in the next 10 years, as represented on this map here behind me. And along with helping on the emergency response and communication fronts, at a time when many law enforcement agencies in most counties have had to cut back on sheriff's deputies, we've actually increased the number of sheriff's deputies we are putting out on the streets, working with local police officers to respond quickly to crime. I initiated this program last year, and I can report to you now that it is working well. Part of my mission as county executive is to initiate these kinds of new programs. But I also inherited some things which we had to manage more effectively. We inherited a physical plant made up of dozens of outdated and sometimes dilapidated buildings, which were inefficient in every sense of the word. Millions of taxpayer dollars were being wasted on the increasing maintenance costs for this collection of work sites. And to make matters worse, it was inconvenient for residents and it discouraged productivity by our workers. Partnering with private sector, we launched a top-to-bottom review of our physical space. I laid out multiple objectives for this process. First, I wanted to reduce our annual operating costs. Second, I wanted to improve the customer experience. Third, I wanted to improve worker conditions. Fourth, I wanted to locate a facility which was consolidated in the downtown area and would build on the downtown momentum which all of us have witnessed. And working with my colleagues on County Council, we have done all those things. The new consolidated county administration building will revitalize the area of 9th and Euclid and restore the long-dormant Ameritrust complex. It will create a brand new convenient facility for taxpayers. It will be an example of green construction and create hundreds of construction jobs. It is also the basis for a $180 million economic development project right in the heart of downtown. And it creates more housing at a time when downtown occupancy rates are at a record high. And it does all of that by saving the taxpayers approximately $139 million over the next 25 years. In other words, we took a situation which had become a fiasco, we resolved it, we created a huge economic development project out of it, we helped revitalize a crucial part of our downtown, and we saved money at the same time. That's exactly the kind of thing people hoped would happen with this new form of county government. We also inherited a Medical Mart and Convention Center project, which seemed to be, quite frankly, losing its way when we took office. As you know, there was a great deal of skepticism about whether the project would be constructed on time and on budget, and whether the business plan could be executed, or even whether there was a business plan for the facility. And that skepticism was not unreasonable. But today I can report to you that we are in a completely different place with this project than we were just 2 years ago. The construction of this incredible facility will actually be done ahead of schedule and under budget. And those are two descriptions which unfortunately have been all too rare with public projects. And the business end of the project is hitting the performance benchmarks we set for it. Already, there are 70 conventions and meetings scheduled for the convention center portion of the project, beginning this summer with the Senior Games, one of the largest athletic events in the country, with 15,000 athletes coming here to compete. And on the medical mart side of the ledger, the progress is even more notable. As we have continued to market this facility, a consensus emerged that the name Medical Mart did not truly capture the work that was to be done there. And after discussions with our stakeholders, today I am announcing that the Medical Mart portion of the project will be known as the Global Center for Health Innovation. And this name change is being announced as we also announce enormous progress in the tenants which have committed to this facility. We have already announced commitments from tenants such as GE Healthcare, Philips, the Cleveland Clinic, University Hospitals, Johnson Controls, and today I can announce that HIMSS, which is the Healthcare Information Management Systems Society, it's one of the largest healthcare associations in the country, and I might add that it was the original anchor tenant for the proposed Nashville facility, has agreed to be an anchor tenant of our facility, and they have committed to leasing an entire floor of the Global Center for Health Innovation. This brings our occupancy of the facility to well over 50%, and there are going to be more announcements in the coming weeks, and we are actually facing the prospect of having to turn down potential tenants, which was something that virtually nobody believed was possible a few years ago. But I will say that the skepticism surrounding that project, as I said, was warranted. But skepticism no longer belongs as the dominant theme of our public discourse. We've emerged from circumstances that lesser communities could never have survived, and it's time to be proud of that. The greater Cleveland area is improving, and we know it, and we have to believe it if we expect to communicate that new confidence to the rest of the world. Now, my family has lived in the greater Cleveland area since the 1870s when my grandparents arrived here, or great-grandparents arrived here from Ireland. And this community has given my family much more than we had a right to expect. And we're very proud of what's been built here. So it was hard for me, and I bet it was hard for a lot of you, to live through years when the pessimists and the naysayers and all of those who discounted this community dominated our local discussions and debates. But now that crowd is getting quieter and quieter and smaller until they've really reached a point of irrelevance. So it's really not about them anymore. With the convention center as just the latest in a string of successes, we just need to keep pushing ourselves. Not to match previous generations, but to outdo them. There was recently some public discussion of whether or not we could host one of the major political conventions in 2016, and I'm certainly very supportive of that effort. Now, the last national political convention we hosted was in 1936. I think Jim Foster helped moderate some of it. But those of you who know your local history know that a lot more happened in Greater Cleveland in 1936. Now, 2016 also happens to be the 80th anniversary of the Great Lakes Exposition of 1936. It was an event that celebrated Cleveland as a capital of the entire Great Lakes region, and it brought millions of visitors to downtown. Now, the organizers of that event knew that the boundless optimism described by that essayist back in 1913 had been shrouded by the Great Depression. And so they defined their mission as follows. They said that Cleveland has for several years been so depressed by adverse circumstances that a forward-looking enterprise is needed to revive the sagging spirit of civic pride that formerly characterized this city. The private and the public sectors rallied behind the concept, and in just a few months, a startling short period of time, they created an event and a physical space that captured the attention of the country and the imagination of this community ever since. With all of the accomplishments we've achieved in the last few years, another Great Lakes Exposition in 2016 could be the perfect opportunity to honor our past and celebrate our present. and let America know that our boundless optimism is restored and we're ready to compete against the world again. Now, I think a second Great Lakes Exposition could be something that continues to build confidence in our community, but I also have other sources for my optimism about our future. One of the best parts of my job is that I get to meet with the heads of all of the great institutions in this region, and they all have ambitious, long-range plans for their organizations. So while I've been busy laying out a long-term plan for Cuyahoga County, they're working on their own long-range plans. There's an ambitious plan, for instance, for improving Playhouse Square, and Cleveland State University, and Case Western, and University Circle, and the Rock Hall. And we've already seen the results of long-term planning for the Cleveland Museum of Art, and the Museum of Contemporary Art, and the new aquarium, and the Cleveland Clinic, and university hospitals, and the Gordon Square Arts District. And there are even more plans on the drawing board, from the Cleveland Metropolitan School District to the Greater Cleveland Partnership to individual entrepreneurs, whether they be on West 25th Street or in Lakewood or at a business incubator in Shaker Heights. And what about the plans that we never hear about, like the recent college graduate who has a plan to start their own business, or the high school student who plans to be the first in their family to go to college? It doesn't matter if it's the plans of a Fortune 500 company, the plans of a community development corporation, the plans of a faith community, or the plans of a single mother training for a new career. It could be a millionaire philanthropist who's planning to give back to the community he loves. Or it could be a child growing up in the toughest of neighborhoods who is planning their escape from poverty. These plans aren't in conflict. They don't require that some of us fail so that some of us can succeed. A unified county doesn't mean that we don't have a diversity of aspirations, because these aspirations are consistent with each other, and each one helps create this tapestry of a truly great community. And it's the sum total of these plans, which are going to build an unbreakable foundation of boundless optimism. I want to thank you for listening to my plans for Cuyahoga County, and I invite you in the coming years to make your plans with us for the future. I'm looking forward to your questions, and thank you very much.
Today at the City Club of Cleveland, we are listening to Cuyahoga County Executive Ed Fitzgerald's 2013 State of the County Address. We will return to County Executive Fitzgerald momentarily for the traditional City Club question and answer period after a few announcements. We encourage you to formulate questions for our speaker now and remind you that your questions should be brief and to the point. Please form a line behind 2 microphones at the front of the room to ask your question. We welcome all of you here and those listening to WCPN 90.3 FM, WCLV, WTAM, or one of the many radio stations carrying this broadcast across the country. Our television broadcast partners are WVIZ PBS, IdeaStream. Television broadcasts of the City Club are made possible by Cleveland State University and PNC. Our live webcast is supported by the University of Akron. We are pleased to have corporate sponsorship for today's forum from the Sisters of Charity Health System. With us today at the head table are Sister Judith Ann Karam, President and CEO of the Sisters of Charity Health System, and Joanne Clark, President of the St. Vincent Charity Development Foundation and Vice President of Corporate Affairs. Would you please stand to be recognized for your support? Thank you. We are also delighted at all of the corporations and nonprofit organizations who purchased tables for today's event. Please see your printed program for a full listing, and we thank you all for your support. Now we would like to return to County Executive Fitzgerald for our traditional City Club question and answer period. We welcome questions from members and guests alike. If you have a question, please move to the microphones in the front of the room. First question, please.
Mr. County Executive, you talked about your Western Reserve Plan. At the same time, Eric Gordon has unveiled a transformation plan for the Cleveland School District. Can you talk a little bit about how those two plans might come together and we as an entire county can work to support the work that Eric and the school district are doing?
Sure. I think a couple different ways. One is I think that our college savings account plan is very consistent with the vision that Mr. Gordon has for the Cleveland schools. And actually, one of the first meetings that I had after we had come up with that proposal was with Eric Gordon, and he was actually the first school superintendent to say that not only do they embrace it, but they want to figure out a way to incorporate it into their curriculum, because it's really an advantage if you can talk to a child about something very tangible about finances. It obviously helps with mathematics, but it also makes something very real about communicating a sense of the future to that child. The other thing that I think is so important is I think it is impossible to have an economic strategy and then have an education strategy that is in a completely different silo. What we know and what the chart that we showed, I'm sure it's difficult for everybody to read it, but there is an absolute one-to-one relationship between educational attainment and economic attainment. And if a child leaves the Cleveland Metropolitan School District and doesn't have a plan for their future, whether it's vocational education or whether it's going on to get a 2-year degree or a 4-year degree, they are almost certainly doomed to poverty. We know that. All the data shows us that. So I think as we continue to develop economic opportunities and workforce training programs, there are lots of ways that we can coordinate those with all of the school districts, not just the Cleveland schools, but particularly because that's where the greatest need is.
Executive, thank you so much for being here today. You talked a lot about the development that's happening within the city of Cleveland with the Rock Hall and all of that. Can you talk a little bit more about how we're developing outside of the city and into the further reaches of the county?
Sure. I thought you worked here. I didn't know you could ask a question. What's going on here? No one else wanted to ask a question?
Nobody was really expecting to have time for a question.
Wow. Hey. I learn from my mistakes. It's continuous improvement. You know, we have had a focus on downtown Cleveland, which I think is appropriate, because what I always tell people, and I happen to live in a suburb, what I always tell people is that suburbs should have, a suburban resident should feel two senses of ownership in this county. They should feel a sense of ownership in their own community, and they should feel a sense of ownership of downtown. And 70% of the people that work downtown don't live in the city of Cleveland. So I've always thought that that was the common area that helps define not just the city of Cleveland, but all the suburbs. So we have a particularly close relationship on economic development with the city of Cleveland. And our biggest projects, for instance, the biggest project that we have been a participant in is the AmTrust financial deal. And Mayor Jackson and I have a very close relationship on these economic issues, and our development departments do as well. So we together came up with a package with AmTrust Financial that's going to create 1,000 good-paying jobs in downtown Cleveland. But we also have plenty of projects in the suburbs. One of the things that the No Poaching Agreement and Business Attraction Agreement has done is that it's brought people together at the table that had never been at the table before. So there were development directors. If you think about it, it's not just that there's 59 different mayors and 59 different city councils. That's what people focus on sometimes. It means there's 59 different economic development directors and 59 different economic development plans. Well, we don't have 59 separate economies here. So it's very important for us to have a more seamless approach to economic development. If you look at where our money has been spent, there is a large percentage in the city of Cleveland, but there's also a lot of suburban projects, whether it's Lincoln Electric in Euclid or other projects on the west side and on the south side. So we're going to try to have a balanced approach when we invest those funds. Yes, ma'am.
Immigration reform is a very large topic on the national agenda, and I was wondering if you had any thoughts on how immigration reform can play a part here in the economic development of Cleveland and what role the county might play.
Well, I think it's crucial. And if you go back 100 years, again, to that essay that was written about the boundless optimism of Cleveland in 1913, What are the differences demographically between 1913 and 2013? Well, probably the most striking difference is the percentage of foreign-born and first-generation Americans that lived in this country or lived in this community at that time. There's been this ongoing debate that's gone on in the United States for really since the beginning of the founding of the country, whether or not immigrants are a threat to economic security or whether or not they're an ingredient for economic success. And I think all of us, if we go back far enough, our families personally were involved in those discussions. And usually people have a very short memory about how many generations they have been here. But I have absolutely no doubt that encouraging immigration to the Cleveland area is first of all addresses our population decline, but it also really adds fuel to entrepreneurship. There's a much higher percentage of entrepreneurship among immigrants to this country than there are to those that are born here, and I think that it's a mistake to look at immigration as somehow detracting from our economic possibilities. I think it adds to it. Yes, sir.
Mr. County Executive, I was very interested to hear about your plans for a 2016 Great Lakes exhibition. Could you speak a little bit more on that?
Well, I think it has to be defined. I can tell you I've had discussion with Mayor Jackson and some of the local nonprofits here and business associations, and there's a lot of interest in it. But I am intentionally not being too prescriptive about it. If you go back to 1936 and look at what they based the Great Lakes Exposition of that year on, it was on what were the really hot industries of the time. Now, it doesn't mean that we need to recreate that exactly. So we could go in a number of different directions. The Great Lakes Exposition of 2016 could be based around medicine. It could be based around music in the Rock Hall. It could be based around the performing arts. It could be based around entrepreneurship. It could be based around the sustainable food industry that we have, or it could be a combination of all those things or none of those things. But it's an invitation to have that dialogue. And we can scale it the way we want to scale it. If we want to do it once a year, if we want to do it every 5 years, if we want to wait another 80 years, if we want it to be a local event, a regional event, a national event, an international event, that all depends on the level of interest and the energy and the commitment from all these institutions. One of the things, if you go back to 1936 and look at how it happened, it wasn't, yes, there was public participation. The mayor and the county commissioners participated. President Roosevelt, actually, it's very interesting, he pressed a button on his desk to officially open the event, and he was there for part of the event. But it isn't going to be driven by government, not if it's going to be a success. What really made it happen in 1936 was the private sector said, we're proud of what we've done here, we have a great story to tell, and this is our opportunity to showcase ourselves to the world. So I've had some very encouraging conversations, and we'll have to see how that develops. But it will not be by me personally defining exactly what it's going to be. I'd like to have some input, but it's going to be defined by the people themselves, I think. Yes, sir.
Chief Executive Fitzgerald, this is perhaps a fair segue to a question about something which would occur in 2016. I am genuinely thrilled by what you've accomplished, as I think many people are. But I am also distressed at the notion you might run for governor in 2014. Would you please speak to us about whether or not you feel that would be leaving us in the lurch and that some of the momentum you have would be lost?
No. Next question. No, listen, I really wanted to focus about the county and the work that I've done at the county here today. But as I said in my speech, the progress that's been made in the county, there are a lot of people that need to share in it. And I appreciate the compliments, but there are a lot of people that made it happen and will continue to make it happen. And it's not dependent on what my career plans are. I will say I've been somewhat amused, and I don't put you in this category because I know you were a supporter, but some people who thought it would be a disaster for me to have a first term are outraged that I haven't said I want a second one yet. Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Fitzgerald, I work in the executive search industry, and all too often we find it necessary to go outside the county, outside the region to attract top talent into the many open positions here. Does the county, do you have strategies to ensure that we have a well-qualified workforce for top leadership, entrepreneurial leadership in the county?
That is an excellent question, and I have to tell you, during our transition period, that was a real challenge. I believe that after all of the attention of changing the form of government and in a high-profile election, and if we just kind of threw open the doors of the county process by posting our positions and putting everything, making everything available in terms of leadership positions, that we would be inundated by this wave of highly qualified candidates from all over the country. It didn't work that way, because one of the things that we had to live with was the reputation that had been established by some of my predecessors wasn't exactly a selling point for some people to come and work for the county. Now that has improved, but it is still a challenge. We have used search firms to try to encourage top-level leadership. Some of our positions, and this is really in the first time in the history of the county, we have done national searches and recruited folks. So, for instance, our Chief Information Officer, although he has roots in Ohio, and he's done an outstanding job, we recruited from Broward County, Florida. Our medical examiner, we recruited from Rhode Island. Other folks came from outside the immediate Cleveland area, and we've also made sure that those positions are made without any reference to their political affiliation or alliances or anything of that nature. I remember it was kind of an interesting point at one time. A Plain Dealer reporter called me at one point and wanted to know all of the political affiliations of the members of my cabinet. And I said, I don't know the political affiliations of every member of my cabinet, and I didn't know at what point of the job interview that would have been appropriate for me to ask. It turned out later I had more Republicans than I realized, but the point is we're trying to establish a merit system. The other part of that, by the way, in terms of establishing a talent pipeline into the county, the boards and commissions that the county oversees and that I make appointments to and that council sometimes sometimes confirms, depending on the appointment, that needs to be an open process as well, because those can be a kind of a pathway to participation in the county, not necessarily as an employee, but as a person of talent. And one of the things that I think was lacking under the old system is those appointments were made very quietly and very privately. We have posted all of the positions of the hundreds of board appointments that I make. All of them are posted on the internet, and we encourage people of talent. I would encourage anyone here or anyone listening to this broadcast, if you have a skill set that you want to share with the county, we're more than open to your participation. Yes,
County
ma'am.
Executive, I was wondering if you could talk about the impact unit and the progress that has been made so far with that.
Sure. The impact unit that you're referring to is basically our community policing unit that we established in the Sheriff's Department. I know I went on at a fair amount of length about how much money we saved. Now, some of that money was put into reserve, but the reason that all those savings were important was that it also allowed us to do things strategically that other counties could not do. I don't know if there's another county in this state that has been in the position of hiring more sheriff's deputies, but we have. So our impact unit is made up of about a dozen sheriff's deputies. It is assigned on a rotating basis to the various communities around Cuyahoga County, and they don't replace local law enforcement, but they work with local law enforcement. There have been about 1,000 arrests, either people that were wanted on warrants or other arrests that they've helped with local law enforcement that have been performed by just that small group of officers within the last year or so. And so it's been a great help to local law enforcement at a time when a lot of law enforcement had to be cut back because of the cuts from the state budget and the devastation of the local government fund. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, I was just wondering if there's any further talks with the city government officials and yourself about the possibility of relocating Burke Airport.
Well, Mayor Jackson, first of all, it's City of Cleveland property, and Mayor Jackson and his administration have developed a master plan for the development of that entire area, and it preserves Burke Lakefront, but it does bring development closer to Burke Lakefront. One of the things that the mayor did that he didn't have to do that I am quite appreciative of is that this whole question of developing the area north of the stadium and around the airport is one that's of huge public concern to the entire community. And I think the mayor very wisely has convened kind of a task force to oversee the development opportunities around that space. And he's included the county, myself, and the county and county representatives, as well as folks from the private sector and other public entities in that conversation. Now, if the mayor wanted to, he could have said, it's Cleveland property and it's a Cleveland issue and that's it. But he was generous of spirit enough to include us in those discussions. So I think we have to see the way that unfolds. I certainly know that the success that we're going to see with the Global Center for Health Innovation and the Convention Center, I think is going to really increase the momentum that's going to make a development of our lakefront more probable in the next few years.
I have a very short question. The new facility at 9th and Euclid, is there going to be a parking lot?
That's what I like, specifics. I like specifics. I'll give you a short answer, yes. Thank you. You're welcome.
Hello again.
Welcome back.
Let me try a question you will answer. How is the balance of power between the executive and the council? How is that relationship working? Does it need to change?
I think it's great. She's nodding her head yes. I think it's good. Look, you're supposed to have some disagreements. You know, there's an old saying, if two people agree on everything, one of them isn't thinking. Well, there's 11 council people. They're not going to agree on everything. And then there's 11 council people and an executive. We're not going to agree on everything. But they put me through my paces when they think there's something I could do better, and there's times where I think they get off track. But look, you look at what we've done. We've made very difficult decisions in the last couple of years. These budgetary, there would have been much easier routes to go, much easier paths to go on taxes and spending and all these various initiatives. And the council, I think, has responsibly kind of elevated the dialogue. And they've been supportive, but not a rubber stamp when it comes to my proposals and initiatives. And I try to respect their role as well. You look at the whole decision to land on a site and a location and a plan for the Consolidated County Administration Building. It's an issue of enormous complexity. And they dove into it and spent countless hours with it, and they worked with us. Now, we could have gotten into a real tug of war over it, but we ended up, I think, making a decision that was in the best interests of the whole community. What I've seen from them consistently, and I know they have their critics just like I have my critics, but what I've seen from them consistently is a lack of partisanship. There's 8 Democrats and 3 Republicans, and very, very rarely do things divide on a partisan basis. And so I've been very encouraged. I think that they've set an example to a lot of other legislative bodies. Certainly when we see what goes on in Washington and Columbus in terms of excessive partisanship, we don't suffer from that here, and I think that speaks well of them.
Today at this special City Club Forum, we have been listening to the 2013 State of the County Address by Cuyahoga County Executive Ed Fitzgerald. Thank you, County Executive Fitzgerald. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. This forum is adjourned.
PNC is proud to support the presentation of this City Club of Cleveland Friday Forum on WVIZ PBS.
Additional support comes from Cleveland State University. Support for closed caption transcripts of City Club forums is provided by the Nordson Corporation Foundation.